So a lot of people have written, I guess, in the last couple of years about the changeovers that have been occurring from the new media. And I think, we all hear about Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, social networking sites. And I think a lot of the claims that are being made is that the culture is being radically transformed, that people are being radically transformed, that in their basic sensibilities, in their orientations about privacy, in their sensibilities about ownership, in their memory orientations. One example would be that it's sometimes called search engine mind, and they'll say, that people today have search engine mind rather than memory orientation. So if you go ask a grandparent how many poems do they know, they'll be able to tell you a good number of poems. And if you go to people a little bit younger, people who are teenagers, and you ask them how many poems they know, they will know no poems, or they'll know very, very few, or very few people will know that many. And if you ask phone numbers, many people don't know phone numbers, young people today, whereas older people have a big store of numbers they know. And even more there is, I guess, the just not knowledgeability itself of to what extent does a person take knowing something to be important rather than the ability to find the relevant information if you need it. And so there is this sort of externalizing of the brain into external hardware and externalizing knowledge so that the individual, and it's partly to deal with information overload, but the individual is able to and get access when they need it, but they feel like memorizing stuff or having to commit things to memory is too difficult, problematic, or in some way it's seen as um, passe or old school or something like this. Related fronts would be the rise of citizen journalism and the way that people can go with a phone, it's some fancy smartphone, and they're able to do like live time vlogging, and then they can upload a blog and they can distribute information laterally. Phones have been very powerful in the way that they have, I guess, facilitated activism, promoted rallies, and I think organized people in flash mob sort of fashion. Suddenly, you can precipitate a great many of people in a kind of swarm that would be very difficult without that kind of technology. I think all that said, one of the areas that maybe I'm concerned with, and it's been a concern over many years, that it's stuff that I've written on, or other work that I've done, but it's the changing role of leadership and what leadership will mean. See, because I think the more that we suggest, and I think it has been suggested, that some of these new technologies, they flatten hierarchies by giving equal information to all parties, it somehow redistributes power so that more people can get more power by having access to information. And the information doesn't all come top down anymore from a single source. It moves laterally and it moves sideways, and people can again facilitate a kind of quick gathering, a quick organizing of people together, and yet the logic is anti-hierarchical. So many of the new media, they cut against traditional hierarchies, delegated authority patterns where there's a chain of command and some person says here's how it goes, and the next person delegates that to the next people down. I wonder the degree to which people aren't experiencing a kind of, I don't know, a loss of what leadership is. And how would one understand leadership if the technologies aren't giving a promise that you won't need leadership in some way? The technologies will be able to compensate for the loss of leadership. What is leadership in the digital age? Are there leaders anymore? Are is each person, if they are fully equipped with internet access, I mean, does it really make sense of that leader follower model? I mean, there's obviously in military places where it's overt, I think it's there. You still have chain of command. I think in kitchens, there, in various bureaucracies, you're still going to have some pretty serious hierarchies in order to keep tasks efficiently flowing on. Other people are going to say, no, all those things are going to start to become questioned. I mean, I guess I don't know. Part of me is resistant, and I would want to get at the question of, are there are there things that high performance people know? Are there strategies for dealing with life that leaders have that, I don't know, puts them at a tactical or strategic advantage? And I mean, I think that it's it's apparent that some people do have some kind of advantages. So on that, I'm going to see if I can shoot some more videos on leadership. But I guess a couple of things I would say really quickly on this is, and feel free to not take this advice. I understand people don't want to take the advice, and this was advice that I took from Lee Thayer, who gave it to me many years ago. But at the time, he said, "Feel free to not take it," because I would understand if you wouldn't. But the point that he said is, don't ever take advice from someone who isn't doing better than you are. And you got to size that up for yourself. When somebody gives you the advice, you go, is this person really the kind of person who I should be taking my advice from? And there it then becomes this, the question of, well, what is the advice? Well, part of it is, if you knew the difference between good advice and bad advice, you would need very little advice, right? Which is kind of funny. But I think in the area of leadership, it starts to move toward the study of followership. That is, most leaders are dangerous because people are bad followers. People are very eager to trade off their own personal responsibilities and obligations to some source of authority that they claim they were following. In doing so, they I guess miss one of the most important aspects of leadership, which is followership. Learning how to select someone worthy of following. And I think part of it is you begin with, don't ever follow someone who says, come and follow me. Oh, I'd be very leery of that. The only people who you'd maybe want to follow would be people who are so excited in following people, maybe you'd want to follow what they're following. And even at a certain point, it can no longer even be about people. It has to be about ideals and principles. Principles like integrity, justice, accomplishment, community. There are kinds of ideals that people can set themselves to. And I think one of the things that's really interesting, and I would encourage people to go, try this out in your own life. Start to talk about high performance, talk about leadership, talk about the role that excuses play and why some people sort of cut themselves slack and why other people, they really have cultivated self discipline. Actually, try to talk about some of that stuff.